I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm the president of the Newton Taxpayers Association. Today is February 10, 2025. And I'm honored today to have with me mayoral candidate to be, if not already, on the Republican side, Attorney Albert Cecchinelli. Al, thank you for coming on. We're going to discuss all things Newton in the context of the Newton Taxpayer Association. And you can find us on Facebook at Newton Taxpayer Association. Give us a ping and so forth if you'd like to comment on any of the discussions we've had tonight. So, Al, you didn't bring your hat, so you've already thrown it in the ring, I assume. What's going on with you, and what's your rationale for running, and what are the kind of the major proposals you'd have for us?
Well, before we start, I'd like to thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on with you. I watch the show regularly. And as a former president of the Newton Taxpayers Association, I appreciate what you do with them, so thank you. Part of the reason I'm throwing my hat into the ring is because Newton needs to get some common sense back. Common sense seems to be missing from the things that we're doing as a city. The overdevelopment, the lack of roads being repaired, the road diet that we're on. There are so many things that need to be changed. They want to increase the population but decrease the roads. It doesn't make sense. So that's the main reason that I'm running, is we need to bring common sense back to Newton.
Yeah, common sense would be nice. I actually met Jeff Speck, who wrote The Road Diet, and I think he's done pretty well, so he doesn't have to be on a much of a economic diet himself. And I met him at a Needham Chamber of Commerce, and I bought the book in order to get to chat with him. And I was talking about how, they have these bike lanes everywhere, which is nice. I ride a bicycle and whatnot. But, 3 months, 4 months of the year, nobody's riding bicycles. It's ice, snow, all that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, it's supposed to save energy, but everyone's lined up at the light, kind of like elephants at the circus, one after the other, and so you miss that opportunity to kind of edge up with the other lane and make turns and whatnot. So traffic backs up, people are idling, and they're wasting a lot of energy there. And I said, plus it makes everything slower and sloggier. And he says, that's the point. I said, what's the point? Part A or part B? He said, no, the point is to kind of make everyone kind of be in pain when they're driving. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why? Because we don't want people to be out driving. All well and good. If you can get away with this, is before COVID and whatnot, where people were sitting at home not driving. But commerce is what keeps the engine running. And I think so I'll kind of play devil's advocate with you. We like Newton is historically the garden city, but in order to have a garden, you have to have some wealth. You have to have a place to have a garden, a home and whatnot. And historically, the people living in Newton have had jobs and whatnot. What as far as the development part, isn't that a natural part of growth and people wanting to be here and building and growing in commerce and so forth? How do you place a limit on what's growth should be there? How much is allowable? How much is overdone?
Well, again, you have to put the common sense onto it. We were the Garden City. People want to come to Newton because of the way of life we have here in this city. If we overdevelop it and pave everything, we're no longer the Garden City. If you can't get anywhere from point A to point B because of the congestion, nobody wants to be here. When you go to a movie theater, there's a limit on how many people can get into the theater. When you go to a Taylor Swift concert, they can only sell so many tickets, even though so many more people want to go. We are the second most densely populated city or town in Middlesex County, and that's 54 cities and towns included in Middlesex County. We're at a point where we can say we've done what we need to do to bring density to Newton. Now we can rely on the other cities and towns to do what they need to do. Density isn't making more affordable housing, it's actually hurting people that want to come to Newton. They want to buy a house in Newton that should be $400,000, $500,000, but if a developer can buy that house, that property, tear down the house, put 3 or 4 units on it and sell those each for $1.5 million, of course they're going to pay a premium for that property, pricing the average first-time home buyer out of Newton forever. You're never going to be able to buy a home with a yard and raise a family in Newton. You're going to have to buy a condo or rent an apartment in Newton if you want to live in Newton in the future. And that's not the Newton I grew up in. It's not the Newton I want to live in.
Well, it's a tricky proposition. I don't want to spend our whole time on that, but I do notice, I spent a show previously on the kind of forced aspect of increased density that the state applied. And we have our own zoning rules. And the way I kind of look at it is like an HOA, Homeowners Association. So if you buy into some place in Florida, it's a big development and whatnot, you basically buy your place, but you also have some rights to the property around it. I think the people, when they buy into Newton, they're paying taxes, they're part of the covenant, they're part of that group, and so forth. And we have the right to make our own laws and whatnot. I mean, you can have zoning variances, and that's sort of still part of the political process, but I feel as if the state strong-armed us based on this kind of emergency law that came through during COVID that had this thing inserted that we're supposed to have density around, any T stops. Yep. And so it's nice having the T, but it's kind of like becomes a punishment in a way, because all of a sudden you don't have the ability as the city to zone down, to the current height and so forth, and everything has to be kind of allowed based on the state proposition. So they basically punctured your ability, your rights to control the city. So with the exception, though, of Chestnut Hill and Elliott, for some reason. And I don't know, how they got those dispensations, and I think it's maybe another one, but I think at least those 2 stops. But it's like, oh, well, why did Chestnut Hill somehow get, their right to have to deal with the increased density and, big apartment buildings? Why did they get that? Have to do with Longwood, the kind of the rent roll, Ruth Ann Fuller living next door? It seems like an oddity for that. It doesn't, not an equal application. Moreover, I think these kind of things where they're just, oh, you're just going to build stuff, I think there's the possibility we might have a kind of a little bit of a crash. Massachusetts is, has a lot of sanctuary cities, and there's very heavy with income coming from the federal government towards their, higher education, Harvard, MIT, all kinds of colleges and universities. I think we might notice a little bit of a drawback on that, as the NIH funding changes and whatnot, where Massachusetts might have a little bit of a mini recession, and we're building and overpopulating, so overbuilding, I guess, over-densifying. I'm wondering what your, concept of that is, whether, we should be a little bit more cautious, or what's your thought?
Well, I think we definitely should be more cautious. With the VCOD, which I call the Village Center Overdevelopment, not the overlay, we banded together. Deb Crosley came to a meeting in Nonantum, and she said, if you don't like my plan, vote me out. And we voted her out. But the city has held a grudge. They recently allowed 300 units on Craft Street with only 260 parking spots, right next door to another facility that was supposed to be an assisted living facility with 190 units, which now they're going to try to get over to luxury apartments now that they've gotten all the variances to get lower parking and stuff like that. So they're overdeveloping us right here in Nonantum. They just recently allowed a 4th story to be added to a project that had all sorts of special permits, adding 3 more units, but no more parking spaces, even though they already had a variance to lower the amount of parking spaces based on 10. Now they have 13 units. With 10, they had 14 parking spots. With 13, they still only have 14 parking spots.
Yeah, no, I've seen this.
I've
dealt with a different city in the Commonwealth, and there seems to be the sensibility amongst the urban planning types that reside in city halls to make everyone European. Now, European works pretty well in Europe because they have a higher density already. They didn't build out the same way with the same kind of like vast bits of land that we have, and they didn't build around the automobile to the same extent. And so, all well and good, but people have smaller apartments, and they have fewer things, and so forth. If they want to deal with that, fine. They have much higher taxes. They're doing this European existence. And what's happening in urban planning, from what I can see, is they want to approve units. I'm not sure if it's happening in Newton per se, but they want to approve, big housing developments without any parking. So you're going to be there and you're going to be, a solo person forever. You're just going to be calling up the Uber or not drive, whatever. They want kind of like this, pocket cities with 15-minute city where everything's just a few blocks away and those are the places you go and you're basically living like in a European village. Well, that's nice. Maybe that's a nice little romantic thing when you're a single person and whatnot, but I think families have different needs, different growth, and things are cheaper at Costco and whatnot, and there's no reason to limit this. I think there's kind of a general, with the road diet, and a lot of these concepts is our betters knowing what we should be doing rather than ourselves. I think there's kind of a general disdain from the top down, the elites towards the people.
Well, I agree with you, and that was really evident at that meeting where Deb Crosley just came out and said, I know better, and if you don't like it, vote us out, and we did vote her out. But the city is not listening still. You think that they would have heard us, that we don't want that type of development in Nonantum, and they still went ahead and did it. And it was just beyond sense that they're putting all of those units on the most dangerous stretch of street in Newton already, and they're going to add 1,000 auto trips a day to that one strip.
Cut the streets down.
Yeah.
No, it's a funny thing. It's a weird thing. They want to get everyone on the trains, and they want to get everyone, again, they want to urbanify you, and I'm just a little bit wary of a lot of these directors, and I'm going to segue into something we talked about a little bit earlier. There was an article in the Boston Globe, but I think that the theme is the same. They know better what you should be doing, and they know what your kids should be like. They know how you should be, in the road diet and get rid of your car, and kind of like this WEF, you'll have nothing and be happy kind of stuff. You'll live with less. And even if some people want to do that, that's fine, but it's a freedom aspect. And for me, that's kind of not what we signed up for. There was an article, it's titled, you can find it, "The Parents Who Dared to Question Newton's Educational Equity Experiments." And the subheading is, "Mothers who challenged new policies in their kids' school were accused of being racists and right-wingers. Now, even many teachers say some changes went too far." Did you get a chance to look at that article?
Actually, I did. I read the article. It was interesting because that's my life in Newton, being called a racist because I don't agree with everything that they say they want to do. And I'm the furthest thing from a racist. I'm a big fan of the Reverend King. And I love I have a dream, judge a man by the content of his character, not the color of his skin. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 specifically makes DEI illegal when you're putting people into positions based on their skin color, their race, their national origin, their sexual orientation. That's all illegal. We need to get back to putting the best person in the position for the job, regardless of where they're from, who their mother is, what they,
Right.
what God they worship. We need to go back to excellence as opposed to identity.
Yeah, no, I don't think it helps either party. 1,000 years ago, probably more like 30, Jay Severin was on the on Boston Talk Radio, and he had his eye surgeon conundrum, and he said, it wasn't called DEI then; it was affirmative action. He says, I'm not sure affirmative action helps, the parties to whom it's addressed. Like, if you are a black surgeon, and you've gotten there, through the vigor of your efforts and the intelligence and your calm, steady hand, or whatever it is, you deserve every right of the respect. But so his example is that guy's got one eye left, and that eye's got X, Y, Z, glaucoma, whatever, retinal detachment, and you're getting wheeled into Mass Eye and Ear, and you're meeting your surgeon, and he's a black surgeon. Now, going through your head with your one good eye is like, well, okay, fine. He's here. Is it because he was, leapfrogged over somebody else who should be doing my eye surgery, or is it because he is genuinely doing the right thing. And at schools as well, when people are promoted for reasons that have nothing to do with the academics and the ability to do the challenges, their success rates are lower. So I went to Yale back in the Paleozoic, earlier than that, and there was kind of there was affirmative action at that time, and I had a black roommate, loved the guy, and he'd always say, look, I have no athletic skills. He went to Catholic high school, whatever. He says, I'm here because, he had we made a joke out of it, but he was always joking that he was there because he knew the stuff, and he did. He went to law school, he's a great guy, all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is there was a different kind of essence to the, no pun intended. There was like a coterie where, the black students hung out with the black students. It was not because they were on a similar kind of thing going on. They had different challenges from the people who were there who could do the work. And it wasn't, quite the same thing because there was, a lot of really smart black kids and whatnot. But there were more black kids, percentage-wise, who were not able to do the stuff. And it doesn't really, did it help them to be there under stress of not being able to pass their courses? I mean, it's like, is that helping anybody per se? And to that point, so that, again, to segue back to this article, Newton schools have done this kind of thing for equity, which we can define as kind of the equality of outcome, to make people, no matter where you've been, what you've been doing, to get the same result, as opposed to equality of opportunity, which is what Dr. King talks about. And again, we'll stipulate we're both good-looking guys, and we go through life. You've got a law degree, I've got a medical degree, and if we're on the dating scene or a job scene or whatever, we both have the opportunity to get that thing. But it depends on the situation. They want somebody more legal, they go for you. They whatever. So it gives everyone the opportunity. But to force somebody to say, well, we don't have enough, Italian guys, we don't have enough this or that. And to fill some kind of artificial quota, I think it's very regressive, and it doesn't really allow people the liberty to pursue the best thing. And so it forces choices. So I even in the Newton schools, and Anna Nolan, who's our superintendent, she was kind enough to be on with me last year. Towards the end of this, so people are upset because they don't have honors anymore. They're trying to do this equity in the classroom and give everyone the same stuff. Now, we don't like that. We go out to a restaurant. You get to order what you want, I vice versa, and the restaurant's responsive, and you may not even want a meal, whatever. But to get everyone the same stuff, or we wear the same clothing, it's not really something the school should be, forcing on kids, that they should all be getting stuff at the same pace. Like if we have, I don't know, a legal class, whatever, you might pick that stuff up much faster. It's a, I don't know, science thing. I might have different, interests from you, and I might, but this is not really helpful. This is kind of like, mushing everybody together, to use the local non-anthem phrase. But as a mush, how would you feel about that? I mean,
well, I don't think it serves anybody to put them into a situation where they're not going to be able to excel or even keep up, and it doesn't help anybody to hold them back either. A wonderful example is when my niece was in 4th grade and I nannied for her. She was having trouble with math. So I sat down and I worked with her. And she went in and she did the math, and she was getting the questions right, but the teacher didn't like the way she was coming to the answers. So I asked the teacher if she would show me how she wanted me to do it. And she told me, she said, no, I will teach her how to do math. That's my job. Well, she hadn't been doing it. It took me to do it. So I stepped in. My niece wasn't getting what she needed. When you put somebody in a situation where they're not getting what they needed, nobody wins. Mm-hmm. So we need to get the people where they need to be in these classrooms. Kids that are smarter and excel, if they're in a class it's not fast enough for them, yeah, they're going to wander.
Right,
they're not going to work to their
fullest
potential.
It doesn't work. If we just replaced the academic sphere with the sports sphere, and we said, okay, we have football team, but we really don't want everybody can play football exactly the same, right? And so and mind you, girls can play football just as well as boys. Tall kids, whatever. Everyone's the same. Basketball, the same thing. So we're just going to, assign people to be our varsity team. And so we're going to take, I don't know, first lottery, whatever. So that'll be our basketball team. you're not going to win any games, A. B, nobody's going to show up. And C, the kids on that team are going to be miserable because they're going to go up against teams that work on success. You know, I had this, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but, you know, I had like an equity officer in town I work at the time, and we had this argument, and she said everything should be basically equity. I said, well, Boston Celtics, like they don't have enough, you know, Jewish guys on the team. They don't have enough people in wheelchairs. They don't have enough X, Y, and Z. She said, you know, they should. The team should be basically reflect the community kind of thing. Like, all right, well, that's going to be tough unless you convince all the other teams to do that, whereupon nobody's going to watch the thing, and then there's going to be no money for the team, and you're not going to have any basketball players. So it leads to its own devolution. But I do want to get to the quote. So during this process where parents were complaining about the kind of DEI stuff, this kind of oppressed narrative and separating kids based on their race, and you know the white kids, you're all to blame for the ills of the world, and the black kids have been the victims, and whatever. Kids don't feel good about this stuff. It provides, kids have enough divisiveness as it is, and they're all going after each other, finding little niches and whatnot. Whatever. This is promoting a bad mindset. It's not helping their kids. And mind you, it's not teaching the math. It's not teaching the stuff that you're getting paid for that. You know, Laura Ingraham had a book called Shut Up and Sing. She went to a Barbra Streisand concert. Barbra Streisand only did political stuff. And she's like, shut up and sing. Like, I paid my money. You're supposed to sing. We pay our money. Newton taxpayers. We want you to teach. Keep us at, you know, the top of the rung, you know, teaching. I don't think that's occurred. So here's the quote that we got from Superintendent Nolan. Post-pandemic, Nolan said, parent attitudes towards the schools changed, and there was a skepticism about how effective our methods were. For whatever reason, they did not feel heard by the school system, and that is the cocktail that brought us this schism between equity and excellence groups. In fact, the district's existing tagline, equity and excellence, has become divisive, or divisive, however people say it, Nolan said. It will soon be changed to where all children thrive. Now, I have my sensibilities about this. How do you parse this, attorney?
Well, I think part of the problem is that during COVID, parents had to pay attention to what was going on in the schools. The kids were learning online. The parents were seeing what was happening. So there was no option but for their attitude to change and not be confident in what was going on. At the time, there were classes that I was told I was not allowed to supervise with my niece when she was in class because the teachers didn't want the parents to see what was happening. I don't understand that. I mean, a parent should be able to be in the classroom any day they want to go in. That we should not be hiding what is going on. Right there, that should erode your confidence in what the schools are doing. So I don't think I think it was inevitable after COVID that the parents would question what was happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
you know, but it seems like a funny thing. You know, there's an old phrase, better to be quiet and thought a fool than to open one's mouth and
let all doubt be gone or something
yes,
like that.
and convince everybody you are a fool.
Yeah.
So, you know, at the risk of obviating that, I'm going to keep talking. But the fact is, you know, I don't think there's adequate blame, mea culpa here from the schools. Superintendent Nolan wasn't here at the time, all well and good, but parent attitudes towards the school changed. Like it just happened. Like, oh, you know, those parents, they're so fickle. Yeah. Someday they like the school, someday they don't, whatever. And their attitudes change. But basically, it has to do with another quote that is in the same article. Our kids internalize helplessness, fear, shame, and guilt from the learning initiatives designed to increase DEI. This is not how we make social change and progress. That's what parents are saying. And they're saying it for good reason, because they got to see for the first time what was happening in the schools. Yeah. You know, so, you know, better to be thought, you know, the schools are fine than to open it up and see that they're not. And this is what the problem is. So just changing the name to Where All Children Thrive is not going to fix anything unless you actually fix the structural problems, which is to be able to tailor the school to the kid. You know, we have public schools, I get it, and we want everyone to have the opportunity, but not everyone's going to be equally good at track, equally good at football, and this thing flips over exactly to the classroom. There are going to be some kids who really, you know, want to do cartoons and want to do, I don't know, singing and whatnot, and that's where they want to be in life. And there's some kids who are going to be, you know, one thing or another, but the school should be there to identify those kids, but not to make them feel miserable while they're doing it. There's enough, I mean, suicidality has increased. They're transgendering the kids. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is not part of what we signed up for.
Well, I saw it with my niece when they were teaching about it's the white people's fault, and it's your fault that, you know, slavery happened 150 years ago, and you're still the problem. And she would come home and she would be sad about it. And I had to explain to her that it wasn't her fault, that, you know, she was a good person and she wasn't doing anything wrong. And it was a shame that the schools are teaching that, and they're still teaching it. And it's,
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many things wrong.
When you have race be the focus of your teaching, that is racist by definition. You know, they've done polls, and the white people, I think you're white, I can't tell against the background, your face appears whiter than your clothing, but I don't see color, so it's a tricky thing. But the polls have shown that white Americans, if you want to call them that, I hate even saying that, but have much more tolerance for other races if their daughter's going to get married and that kind of stuff. You know, the actual things that, you know, impact your life. You know, somebody you want to work with, somebody, you know, go in a car with somebody. They've done these massive polls, and white Americans are like the least racist people in the history of Earth. You know, you go to other countries and you're going to find a total different sensibility. I have friends who are, you know, from China and whatnot, and this, you know, they'll say, well, you should hear what goes on, you know, in closed households, and you know, blacks against whites and black, you know, there's all kinds of divisiveness. I think, you know, we will do better when we have more commerce and people get together. I was in Armenia, this is closing up, so I'm going to try to give you the last word, but eight years ago, whatever, and everything in Armenia is Armenians, okay? The whole place. It's wonderful. Yeah. I actually enjoyed it a lot. You should go visit. But when I came back here, I saw a billboard like, I don't know, Dukmagian, O'Toole, and Jones. And there are parts of the world you will never see a sign like that where, you know, like Garanti, Finkelstein, and Smith. You know, you just see things that happen because commerce gets people together. And the schools have to, like, promote our ability to have commerce. And Attorney Cecchinelli, last words.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for having me on. Great work you do here. I enjoy the show. Thank you for being in charge of the Newton Taxpayers, because it's a tough job.
Thank you for having nurtured it. I don't do enough, but maybe if we have all of you interested, go contact us on Facebook as it is, and we'll be able to build a bigger, better website and keep your interests in mind. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
Are we there yet?
Yep, we're here.
It's a short drive from your neighborhood to your naturehood. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit discovertheforest.org.